Granny's homemade physical, thermometers, corks, splints, and medical mayhem. The second movement of this composite script from the 6th season of the Beverly Hillbillies shifts the focus from the public spectacle of Jethro's tank to the intimate and highly irregular confines of a homemade medical examination. What follows is one of the series' most sustained and inventive sequences of physical and verbal comedy built entirely around Granny's determination to protect her grandnephew from the hands of army doctors. The scene unfolds with the meticulous logic of rural folk practice colliding against the impersonal machinery of military bureaucracy, and the result is a masterclass in character-driven farce that rewards close attention to both dialogue and implied performance. Granny begins with characteristic directness. She orders Jethro to go in yonder and take your clothes off. His puzzled response, "What for am going on?" maneuvers immediately establishes the comic gap between her purpose and his understanding. She clarifies that she intends to give him a physical examination. The objection that follows from Jed and others that an army doctor should perform the examination is met with Granny's fierce rejection. She recalls that it was one of them goomers that killed Jed's cousin, then misidentifies General Peritonitis as a physician, a malapropism that draws an immediate corrective laugh from the family. The exchange is brief yet dense with character information. Granny's distrust of institutional medicine is not abstract. It is rooted in personal history and maternal duty. She reminds the household that to the army Jethro is just a number, but to her he is Pearl's baby. And she promised Pearl's care for him. The line carries genuine emotional weight beneath the comedy, reminding the audience that Granny's protectiveness is never purely comic eccentricity. Jethro's reluctant compliance sets the stage for the examination proper. Granny first checks his temperature and announces that it is normal 142. The correction that 142 ain't normal is answered with perfect rural logic. It is if your thermometer has been sterilized in boiling water. The joke is simple in construction yet rich in implication. It reveals Granny's genuine if misguided commitment to hygiene, while simultaneously undercutting any claim to scientific precision. In the cultural context of the late 1960s, when military induction physicals were a source of anxiety for many young men and their families, Granny's improvised methods stand as both parody and alternative. The Army physical was designed to classify bodies according to rigid standards. Granny's physical classifies according to the standards of a mountain healer who has seen more than her share of ailments treated with available tools. The examination proceeds to reflexes. Granny instructs Jethro to sit down and cross his legs. The resulting yelp of pain leads to the discovery of a busted knee. Jethro claims he will not be accepted into the army if he is crippled. Granny's response is both disciplinary and hierarchical. She tells him to sit down before she gives him another promotion, then informs him the military language is pure appropriation. Granny has absorbed the vocabulary of rank and deployed it as a tool of domestic authority. Max Baer Jr.'s performance, even in transcript form, must have relied on a combination of physical reaction and vocal protest that made the pain simultaneously real and ridiculous. The audience understands that the injury is recent and suspiciously timed, a fact that will be confirmed later when the psychiatrist reveals that Granny hit him in the knee with a hammer. The throat examination produces some of the sequence's richest verbal comedy. Granny orders Jethro to open his mouth and say "ah." Her reaction is one of pure amazement. She declares him an eating machine with more teeth than a garfish. The tongue, she observes, is coated something terrible. Jethro explains that the coating is wax. Granny's response, "I declare you'll eat anything," is both scolding and affectionate. The detail is consistent with earlier established traits of Jethro's appetite. Yet it gains new comic force when placed inside a medical examination. The wax becomes evidence of a health habit that Granny feels obligated to correct even as she prepares to pass him for service. Irene Ryan's delivery of these lines would have balanced sharp observation with underlying care, never allowing the comedy to tip into cruelty. The ear examination introduces the most memorable physical prop of the sequence, the corks. Granny peers into Jethro's ear and announces that she has found exactly what she suspected. When pressed, she refuses to elaborate, stating that some things the patient is better off not knowing. The subsequent insertion of corks is explained with characteristic practicality. They are placed so the wind will not blow through. Later, when Jed questions the decision, Granny offers a more elaborate demonstration. If you was to finger his ears and blow into his mouth, you could play his head like an ocarina. The image is pure visual comedy waiting to be realized on screen. It transforms Jethro's head into a folk instrument and simultaneously justifies the corks as a form of protective sealing. In performance terms, the corks would have restricted Max Baer Jr.'s ability to hear subsequent dialogue, creating opportunities for delayed reactions and further misunderstanding that the script later exploits at the induction center. The treatment of the busted knee brings the examination to its practical climax. Granny produces a saw and announces that she is going to cut some splints. Jethro's alarm is immediate and vocal. She overrides it with a clear statement of purpose. Uncle Jed is paying for everything else. The only contribution she can offer is her medical skill. The line is quietly revealing. Granny understands the economic reality of the household. Jed's wealth can buy tanks and uniforms. But her value lies in the knowledge she carries from a lifetime of rural healing. The splints are therefore both medical intervention and assertion of personal worth. When she later insists that the splints stay on under doctor's orders and offers Dimples to chew if the pain becomes too great, the comedy remains grounded in her sincere belief that she has done right by the boy. The examination concludes with Granny's official verdict. She informs Jed that she has passed Jethro but that he has some bad health habits he ought to break. The list is precise. He eats hot wax that has left the roof of his mouth all shooty and he keeps bumping into things and busting his knee. The diagnosis is delivered with the authority of a professional who has completed her work. Jethro's subsequent struggle to pull his general's uniform on over the splints provides a final physical punchline. He is, in his own words, already busted back to a civilian before he has even begun. Drysdale's instruction that he wear regular clothes to the army place rather than the uniform completes the deflation of Jethro's military fantasy, at least for the moment. Throughout the sequence, the script maintains a careful balance between farce and character. Granny's methods are absurd by any conventional medical standard, yet they are never presented as malicious. Her protectiveness is absolute. She will not allow the army to treat Jethro as a number because she has promised Pearl that she would care for him. The corks, the splints, the sterilized thermometer and the wax diagnosis are all extensions of that promise. In the broader cultural landscape of 1967, when the draft physical was a bureaucratic ritual that could determine the course of a young man's life, Granny's homemade version stands as a comic alternative that privileges family knowledge over institutional classification. Buddy Ebsen's Jed remains largely observational during the examination, his few interjections serving to register mild concern without undermining Granny's authority. The performance choice is consistent with the character's established role as the family's moral center. He trusts Granny's intentions even when her methods produce results that will later baffle the army. Donna Douglas is largely offstage, yet the earlier references to Ellie Mae and the pig keep the domestic circle complete. The scene belongs almost entirely to Irene Ryan and Max Baer Jr., and their interplay demonstrates the series' long practice in pairing Granny's kinetic energy with Jethro's combination of compliance and protest. The language of the sequence is worth sustained attention. Granny's medical vocabulary is a hybrid of folk terminology and half-absorbed professional phrases. Temperature is announced in numbers that defy normal human range. Reflexes are checked with the same authority she would use to test a mule. The throat becomes an occasion for zoological comparison. The ear becomes a site of both diagnosis and inventive remedy. Each linguistic choice reinforces the central comic premise. Granny is not parodying medicine so much as practicing a parallel system that has its own internal coherence. The audience is invited to laugh at the results while still recognizing the integrity of the intention. By the time Jethro is ordered to put his clothes back on, the script has accomplished several narrative tasks at once. It has generated a series of escalating physical gags. It has deepened Granny's character as both comic force and genuine protector. It has prepared the visual and auditory handicaps, the limp and the corks that will drive the comedy at the induction center. And it has reaffirmed the series' fundamental loyalty to rural values in the face of institutional pressure. The homemade physical is not a rejection of the army so much as an assertion that the Clampett family will meet the army's requirements on its own terms. The sequence also offers a quiet commentary on the nature of care. In a decade when medical authority was increasingly centralized and professionalized, Granny represents an older model in which healing was a family responsibility and knowledge was transmitted through practice rather than credential. Her methods are imperfect and often counterproductive, yet they are motivated by love rather than procedure. The comedy arises from the gap between intention and result, never from any suggestion that the intention itself is suspect. That generosity of perspective is one of the enduring strengths of the Beverly Hillbillies, and it is fully on display in this extended examination scene. As the corks are settled in Jethro's ears and the splints secured to his knee, the script has completed its preparation for the next major movement. The boy who entered the examination as an eager recruit will leave it as a limping, hard-of-hearing figure whose appearance will thoroughly confuse the officers waiting at the induction center. The transformation is entirely Granny's work, and it is work she performs with complete confidence in its necessity. The audience, having watched every step of the process, is primed to appreciate both the immediate physical comedy and the larger structural joke that is about to unfold. In this way, the homemade physical stands as a perfect example of the series' ability to build elaborate comic machinery from the simplest materials: a thermometer, a pair of corks, a saw, and the unshakable conviction of a mountain healer who has never met a problem she could not address with the tools at hand.